Hello, my name's Rachel. I'm from Northumberland and I've got a 3-year-old daughter called Betsy who has Down syndrome. I had a antenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome. I had an amniocentesis and I chose that because Betsy needed surgery immediately after she was born, and we felt that the surgeon needed as much information as possible about her in order to give her the best chances. We talk a lot about informed choice in our community, so I think I'd quite like to highlight what informed my choice. And what informed my choice is the fact that I'm a qualified teacher who has a lot of years of experience of working with people with learning disabilities and Down syndrome, so I knew the reality of the condition, the fact that everyone that I've ever met with Down syndrome, and that's a lot of people, possibly over 100, I'm not sure, always had rich and fulfilled lives. They've taught me so much over the years. Some of the best people that I know have Down syndrome, so I really I knew the true lived experience of the condition, and therefore I didn't have any fear or worry about it, and I think that is true information, because you've lived it, you've met people, you've lived as part of their life, so I thought it was quite important to share that, because that's quite hard to pass on to somebody who's never met a person with Down syndrome. So thank you very much for listening.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm from Kent. I've got a 2.5-year-old little girl with Down syndrome, and I had a prenatal diagnosis at around 13 weeks, which was confirmed by CVS. Reason I had that was because she also had a high chance of having trisomy 13 and 18, so really I just wanted to confirm what her diagnosis was. So to be honest, finding out that she had trisomy 21, aka Down syndrome, was a huge relief, because to me that is well, for me it was just doable, and there was no question of terminating the pregnancy. I didn't really know anyone with Down syndrome, but this was my baby, this was the child I'd been given, and I was more than happy to take on a new journey and see life through a different lens.
Hi, I'm Janet and I come from Sheffield. I'm also a doctor, and I've got 2 daughters, Kirsty age 19 and Melissa age 13. Kirsty has Down syndrome, and I found out when I was 20 weeks pregnant from a scan that Kirsty was going to have Down syndrome. I then chose to have an amniocentesis, and that's because I felt it was important for the medical profession to know if Kirsty definitely had Down syndrome, as she was needing surgery. I have met people with Down syndrome socially and through my profession, and therefore I had knowledge that people with Down syndrome are able to lead happy and regular lives. I believe in informed choice. I think it's very important that women are given up-to-date medical information and up-to-date information about the lives of people with Down syndrome at the moment. There are lots of support groups compared to when I knew I was going to have a child with Down syndrome 20 years ago. There's a lot of support and progress in terms of education and employment. There's also the concern on the impact on siblings. However, our experience has been positive. Kirsty and Melissa have a strong sibling relationship, and it's also known that siblings quite often go on to having careers in the caring profession. So this is a photograph of Kirsty as a baby, and this is our family photograph, and all I can say is that I'm very proud of both of my daughters.
My name's Caroline. I live in Stockton-on-Tees in the northeast of England with my husband and our 2 boys. Our youngest son, Leo, is 4 years old and he has Down syndrome. We found out that he had Down syndrome when I was 14 weeks pregnant. I had had a blood test earlier on in my pregnancy which came back as a 1 in 5 chance of the baby having Down syndrome. And so we decided to go ahead with a CVS test after that to find out definitely one way or the other. And that was just more for our own information really, so that we knew one way or the other. I'd always thought previously to having the pregnancy with Leo that having a baby with Down syndrome would not really be something that would be a huge issue. It would be always a pregnancy that will be continued and a baby who will be extremely loved, which is exactly what's happened. I, as a primary school teacher, had the good fortune to have a lovely girl in my school who had Down syndrome, and I got to know her and her family. And so I think that helped me a little bit, having some information there already and having met somebody who has Down syndrome, a child and her family, and getting to know them really well. And as a result of the positive CVS test, we quickly met up with some local families through local support groups. And again, that really helped us because we got to know people who we still really know well and who are friends. And we got to know them, got to know their children, and found out the reality of life with a child with Down syndrome, which is not the same as what many people believe it would be. And we did this because there was no information passed to us from the hospital. So I'm very grateful for the fact that we did our own research and found out what the true situation was. And Leo is very, very loved by both of us and by his brother, and it couldn't have been a better decision for us.
Hi, I'm Katie and I'm mum to Caleb, who has just turned 2. Caleb is my first child, and I was giving a high chance from screening of 1 in 47 at my 13-week scan. I then went on to have the non-invasive prenatal testing, or the NIPT, which at the time I was told was 99% accurate, which I've since found out is actually not as accurate even as the standard screening. But from that we got a 95% chance result that Caleb would have Down syndrome. And then after that result I did opt for an amniocentesis at 16 weeks, just to find out for definite that he did have that extra chromosome or not. I chose to go for the amniocentesis because the few weeks of limbo of not knowing for definite whether he had Down syndrome or not was actually a lot harder to deal with than the actual diagnosis. So for me, I felt like I had to know for definite whether he had it or not. So I had an aunt who had Down syndrome, and when I was at primary school there was a girl at my school also who had Down syndrome. So I've grown up around Down syndrome and I kind of know what I'm dealing with and what the day-to-day life is like. And I knew that most people lead pretty normal lives like the rest of us. They get a job, they get married like Heidi and James, and they can even go on to be actors and actresses like Sarah Gordy, and even excel at physical activities like Chris Nickett, who has just completed an Ironman, which is a huge feat considering I can't even run for the bus, let alone complete an Ironman. I was offered a termination, but I chose to continue my pregnancy. I did consider having a termination, but my thoughts at the time were, what would I do? Would I just have termination after termination after termination until I ended up with the baby that I wanted? And was that fair really on all the previous babies? If I got a high chance of Down syndrome again after a first termination and decided to keep that baby, was the first baby's life not worth the effort? And my answer to both of these questions was no. I couldn't do it. The baby that I was pregnant with was worth it, and I felt that I could deal with it, I could cope with it. Okay, our lives might be a little bit different to normal, we'll just take the scenic route to get to where we need to be. Caleb was born without any health problems. He doesn't have a heart problem, he doesn't have a bowel problem, he doesn't have any physical abnormalities. Okay, he might be taking a little bit longer to learn to walk. He's just turned 2, he signs to communicate to me. He is like no other toddler really. He still throws tantrums, he finds things hilarious, he loves his food. He's very curious, and he enjoys lots of things that any other normal toddler would. You can't predict the future of a typical child, so why should you predict the future of a child with Down syndrome?
Hello, my name is Laura and I am 31 years old. I live in Belfast. I have 2 little boys and my eldest, Nathan, is 2.5 years old and he has Down syndrome. We received a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome after our initial scan showed that our baby had a condition called hydrops, which can commonly be caused by a chromosomal abnormality. Our consultant at the time told us that our baby wasn't going to survive the pregnancy and that we should expect to miscarry him by 16 weeks gestation. So he then offered us a CVS test to find out what was going on, and because we were told that he was going to die anyway, we opted to go ahead with the test so we knew what we were dealing with and if it was ever going to happen in any other pregnancies. 5 days later, the CVS results came back and confirmed Down syndrome. And this actually turned out to be our blessing in disguise, because Nathan then carried to term and was born with no other medical conditions whatsoever. So in hindsight, we are extremely glad that we had a prenatal diagnosis, because we were then able to gather as much information as possible, process all of our feelings, and actually turn to a local support group who have offered us the most invaluable support and guidance, not only through my pregnancy but still to this day. I was never given any positive information about Down syndrome and only ever told negative outcomes, and it wasn't actually until Nathan was in my arms that I realised I had a baby, not just a diagnosis. Nathan is a typical boisterous 2-year-old. He walks, talks, eats, sleeps, plays, climbs on things that he shouldn't do. He's just so much more than a diagnosis, and honestly one of the best things that's ever happened to my life.
Hi there, my name is Hazel and my daughter Emily is 10 years old and she has Down syndrome. I found out when I was 11 weeks pregnant via CVS that she had Down syndrome and was actually very relieved at this result. I had only taken this invasive test because of the likelihood of 2 much more serious conditions, and I really needed to know. The consultant was very neutral when delivering the results to me, and she gave me my options and did include termination in this, but also was quite positive about Down syndrome and said that there was lots of support there, and also said that either way there was no pressure with what decision I wanted to make. I told her immediately that our decision had already been made before we'd even taken the test, because my cousin Lindsay has Down syndrome and she is 10 years younger than me, and I therefore had absolutely no preconceived negative impressions of Down syndrome, and I knew that my cousin Lindsay had led a very full, very happy and very normal life. My consultant was completely on board from the moment that I made my decision, and she was very happy to support me through this pregnancy, which made a massive difference and made me have a very joyous pregnancy, looking forward to my baby being born.